along this line, the line is the expectation, the average. Now, it's a bit hard to make out here. You can definitely see that some of the charter schools are jumping right up, but you have these big clusters that are below the expectation line. And actually, if you do the maths, the average shows that charter schools are below average. Especially this one down here. What's going on with you? And again, here's the same thing, twin city schooling for maths proficiency. And again, you can see, this one's a bit more pronounced actually. You can see that the blue, the traditional schools, are ahead of expectation, where all of the charter schools are falling below expectation, with some exceptions, but what is this one down here doing? Is it the same guy? Do you think he's the same school? Oh no. Okay, but also there's another phenomenon going on here. So we talked before about how in Minnesota, African American people were put into specific groups of housing, and what a big problem that was. Look at this map of the 1980s in the Twin City area, and the red represents essentially segregation. It's the concentration of ethnic minorities within one area. And look how it's changed by 2020. So you can see these huge clusters of ethnic minorities, mainly African American, and you can imagine that this is going to cause a problem down the line. And here we have the number of schools made up of more than 90% non-white students. Okay, we have the year 2000 in blue, the year 2009 in red. In Portland, we have 0 in 2000, and then it's jumped up to 2 in 2009. Seattle started with 14, and it's jumped up to 25. And in the Twin City areas, in 2000 we had 11 schools with more than 90% non-white students. This has jumped up to 83 by 2009. So you get the impression, don't you, that segregation is getting worse. Maybe it's not clear to you why that's a problem, but we will go into it. It's important to remember that this has all happened under the guise of choice. Now, we might not agree that it is choice, but the idea behind charter schools is to offer choice. So people might look at this and say, oh, this is de facto. This is de facto segregation because these people have chosen this level of segregation for themselves. Let's say William Mitchell Law Review has said the following. Minnesota chose its voluntary integration rules over an alternative proposal that mandated racial integration in all public schools and sanctioned non-compliant schools and districts. So possibly the lesson that we're learning here is that maybe you do need some kind of government oversight when it comes to integration. Maybe you need to mandate racial integration. If you leave things to the free market, people make these decisions, or what seem like decisions, which ultimately might threaten social harmony down the line. Now, I have spoken to this with some people who have wondered what's the actual problem of segregation. So let's just jump into it in terms of the one individual mind. Now, everything I'm about to read to you comes from this, the William Mitchell Law Review, a paper entitled A Missed Opportunity, Minnesota's Failed Experiment with Choice-Based Integration. And I understand that it's long, but I think that they've done a very, very good job of explaining, of gathering all of the research and giving a very solid argument for why segregation is, in general, a bad idea for education. So, demonstrated benefits of racially integrated schools. Social science research continues to support the state's compelling interest in pursuing racially integrated education. Integrated schools give all students access to social networks that are connected to opportunity and social mobility. Minority students who graduate from desegregated schools have higher career aspirations than students who attend segregated schools and tend to choose more lucrative occupations in which minorities are historically underrepresented. black male students that attend desegregated schools tend to complete more years of education and have higher college attendance rates. The demonstrated benefits of integration for students of color include improved test scores, higher graduation rates, higher post-graduation incomes, and better life opportunities. Now, all of that sounds quite damning, doesn't it? But there are some compelling defences of charter schools, so let's hear one with part 4, a defence of charter schools. Now, this defence comes from Christopher Stewart, Director of Outreach and External Affairs for Education Post. When the government assigns you by race to inferior schools, that is traditionally what we have considered to be segregation. When parents pick a culturally affirming program for their child, and they are from a historically marginalized population like Indians or black people, I happen to be black Indian, that is so far from the traditional understanding of segregation that it's almost insulting to call it that. We have Somali schools, we have Hmong schools, and we have schools for Native American kids, Stewart said. And those communities don't really see their schools as segregated or isolated. They see them as kind of culturally affirming environments for kids that they can't get in a very white state like Minnesota. Now, what Stewart was saying there makes a lot of sense. I mean, one of the problems of trying to make policy which sees race is it fails to acknowledge that people don't necessarily have one race or another race. Some people are mixed race. What do you do with them? Some people might have a black father and a white mother. Do we half help these people? What if they're only quarter minority? Do we quarter help them? That's the thing. People's races don't fit into a neat little box. And also, the other point that he brings up is about choice and culture. So, in my own hometown, I'm from a place called Milton Keynes, and we have a huge Japanese population. And it's quite common to be walking along and you'll see a sign which is in both English and Japanese pointing to a school. And that's because there's so many Japanese people there, and they want to have a Japanese school where they can learn Japanese culture and Japanese writing. And I don't see anything wrong with that. I don't see a problem there. But we have to distinguish between people who have the luxury of segregating versus those who are segregated based on oppressive circumstances. Let's move on to part 5, Burlington and the lessons learned. Now here is a map of all of the states that have adopted charter school legislation. And you can see that there's only a few states that don't have any left. Now,